I first decided to start writing things and making videos in my own name, uh, it came after a period where I was doing the same thing anonymously for a bit, and I was doing it anonymously because there was a certain amount of fear. It's for the reason that all people do things anonymously online, for the fear of cancellation, for the fear of some sort of repercussions. And I was writing things to try to influence conversation to a certain degree. For Christians, I was trying to point them to taking some things more seriously that were going on in the world, and for maybe the people that were more conspiratorially minded, I wanted to point them back to Christ, because I feel that the Bible speaks very vividly about the reality of evil, and that it's not something to be glossed over, but it also speaks of the only hope that we have in dealing with that evil, which is to trust in Christ. And the thing that really pushed me over the edge, I would say the most radicalizing moment, was the long experience, or the few years of experience of being a father at that time. Because that meant I had something to lose. And that was one of the reasons why many people would be anonymous, because they have a family, and so they can't risk losing a job, or they don't want their family to be harassed. And so anonymity was this thing that was supposed to protect the people that had more at stake. And this kind of leaves the public discourse to be had by a different group of people, basically people that don't have as much at stake in some ways. And therefore, it's a little bit more of a game. And I think that that's a big part of the problem that we see even now, in that people are playing with words online, and they're playing with ideas, and they're playing with them as if it is a game, and they're not taking the stakes seriously. And part of that is because they don't know how serious the stakes are. But at a certain point I realized Christ says, if anyone seeks to protect his life, he will lose it. But if anyone gives up his life for my sake, he will gain it back. And I didn't have a life worth holding on to before I was married and had kids, not significantly. Because when you're young and you're on fire for the Lord, like, the idea of being a martyr is somewhat romantic. It's probably the only thing maybe that is worth sacrificing all of the other comforts that are good. And this is a tension that I felt. I think it's a tension that looms large in evangelicalism and Pentecostalism, in the world that I came out of, that your life, was something that you had to be burnt up, like a flame for God, and that the most hardcore thing you could do would be to go to the missions field or something, or to be in a place where you have to stand up for your faith boldly as a martyr, and to get entangled with marriage and children and things like that, or to seek the more normal role maybe as a pastor or as a layman, was a lesser calling. And that creates a lot of tension, because the desire for those things is ultimately also from God. And that was part of the imbalance I had to overcome to understand that. And what what really came to click for me is that being a father and being a husband was the way in which I was actually most able to live the Christian life well, in serving in those ways. And it made me want to share that joy with others. And so then that kind of puts a tension in there when you think about the idea of remaining anonymous for your own protection. Because obviously I want my family to stay safe, but I also want my children to grow in the right way and to learn to love and honor God. And my role as a father is to represent that. And if my example is one of fear or cowardice, it's going to backfire. And so ultimately, I decided that if there was any risk to speaking in my own name, and I didn't expect, physical violence or anything like that. And realistically, if I had thought about it more, I probably wouldn't have I didn't really have to worry too much about, jobs and things like that. But I kind of came to a position in my mind where I thought, what are the things that are worth speaking about that? And I started off kind of writing a lot of this conspiracy kind of stuff, try to make people be aware of the things that are going on, something's afoot, and this is about 5 years ago, so you can kind of place the circumstances of the day and what all that was about. But what I decided was, I'm not willing to stake my life to some conspiracy claim or to some political movement or some activist thing. The only thing that I was willing to stake my life on was Christ and the Bible. And so my thought was that I would speak the truth, and I would speak truthfully about where the Bible points to certain things in certain ways, and it's not always subject to equally to all interpretations, and that it does speak about the nature of evil. So I try to speak about these things, and I wouldn't shy away. But a big part of the reason for doing that was because I had something at stake, because I had skin in the game. And I'm not ashamed of that at all. I think that was the right thing to do, and I feel that even more strongly. But it was because I was a father, and because I felt ultimately fatherlessness is one of the greatest issues that has brought us to this place. There's a generation of fathers that have maybe let their sons down. There's a large segment of the population that's never had a father in their life or a father-like role model. Fathers, they are weak and cowardice. They have cowardice and fear and all these things, and there's so much of that. It's created this crisis of masculinity, this sort of idea that masculinity is toxic, and on one side of the equation it spirals into this self-loathing, and the very fact that fatherhood is good is such a simple statement, but that was almost like a provocative thing to say. It was a radical thing to say, and on the other side, I wanted to push back on the idea of fear, because so much of the Christians would affirm that being a father is good, but they would put so much fear into people about, the end times and signs and symbols or the fear of hell or all these things. And it was just, there was nowhere to go for hope. And I began to feel hope, and I felt that I needed to speak that out. And so, when thinking about the murder of Charlie Kirk, the martyrdom, people are trying to give explanations or reasons why he was targeted, because he was a political speaker and because he had influence in all these things. But the only reasons why he was there is because he was a Christian and he felt called to speak. And when he became married and became a father, that doesn't reduce the importance of that calling. It increases it because then you are experiencing that thought of, what will my children think of me? How am I going to portray a life of Christ before them? And so he did everything in the right way. And so, ultimately, like, those are the central things. He's a Christian, he's a husband, he's a father. And that is what makes his death tragic, because that is what he was standing up for. Now, you could say, yeah, but conservative politics. Well, here's the thing. If anyone who's 31 years old and is a father and a husband is killed, that is a tragedy. That is a terrible tragedy. But there aren't many people who fit that category they're all on one side of the political equation. And so the politics is connected to it because it was in defense of the faith and in defense of the family. And even, I never watched anything but little sound bites of him before. I wasn't really interested in that thing. But what he represents, the politics is a job that he had. But what he represents is a father who put himself in the place of being willing to speak openly and publicly and affirm the goodness of God, the goodness of marriage, the goodness of fatherhood. And in that way, he's exactly the same as me. And if that is something that the devil wants somebody dead for, that's just proof that that's something worth living for. And so I don't think that anger at a political party is going to solve anything. I think when people keep talking about, they don't know how, people don't recognize how much they hate us. That's a phrase I've kept hearing. Yes, we do. But it's the devil and his demons that hate us. Those people that are saying the things and doing the things are immature. Hatred is a very immature emotion. It's something that fathers are supposed to teach their children to let go of when they're young. It's the behavior of toddlers to throw tantrums and to hate people. And somebody had mentioned, yes, and Paul Antleitner talked about patricide, and this is an issue. That's there's one side of the political divide that hates their fathers, and then on the other side there is a group of fathers that want to hold on to power longer than they should. And both of those are inspired by the same thing. And it's the serpent who hates the humans made in the image of God. And so ultimately, I'm just more convinced that the most important thing is for fathers who have something to lose, fathers who have reasons maybe that they could justify not speaking out, need to be willing to speak out. And the political, as far as the policies and the ideas, those things are not central, except for getting to the very simple point of policies that support and affirm that having a family is good, that marriage is good, that children are good, being made in the image of God, male and female, is good. And that's, those are the things that sane people can agree on. And so that should be the beginning of common ground. And all of that goodness comes from God, and they created it good. And the community and the environment that supports those things is going to also support and uphold people's right to gather together and worship. And that's what we need. But the important thing, I think, especially now, is for fathers to continue to be willing to speak up and affirm that there is good in this world. And the evil is just that which is in opposition of the good. But the darkness does not overcome the light. So we should take courage in that and keep doing what we're doing and continue to speak.